Greetings from LA, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue on with our journey, our discussions, our discoveries, and our explorations with respect to the recent releases made by the Criterion Collection during this year of 2023. And that brings us to a title which already currently exists in the Criterion Collection, in fact, at spy number 408. And this is a work which this year, on the occasion of 2023, sees a new re-release, this time employing the 4K UHD plus Blu-ray combo format. And I'm speaking of a film which is described as being from the year 1960. And the name of the filmmaker is Jean-Luc Godard. And the name of the work is A Bout de Souffle or Breathless. This is a film which is described as being from the year 1960, and it is from the producer Georges de Beauregard, and the director of photography is Raoul Coutard. And this is the screenplay is credited to Jean-Luc Godard and based upon original treatment by François Truffaut and director Jean-Luc Godard, and starring among others in a very iconic film, or a casted film, Gene Seberg and Jean-Paul Belmondo and others. This is the work which is A Bout de Souffle, or as it's referred to here, Breathless. So Breathless is a very famous work. It's a landmark work. It's a type of iconic film, and it's an iconic film for many reasons, as regarded generally speaking. It's known to be sort of ushering in what's referred to as the Nouvelle Vague, or French New Wave, type of form and format and movement of French cinema into, or late 1950s, early 1960s, with very key cinematic voices that had their hands in as very prominent critics and students of cinema. Cahiers du Cinéma crowd, François Truffaut and Jean-Luc Godard being examples of people from this area, which became a type of movement, which became a type of phenomenon, which became its own, say, industry, in a manner of speaking, its own identity within the context of French cinema. And so in that way, it's a very key work, and there are, I think, many stylistic devices, as well as hints and nuances, both direct and indirect, both sort of overt and also maybe clandestine, or maybe more latent or hidden, that I think speak towards a type of socio-political context that is embedded in these films, especially as we get further into, say, we're talking about the context of Jean-Luc Godard's filmography. Films after Breathless. But in that way, Breathless is considered to be a film, or among the films that, quote unquote, started the ball rolling, in a manner of speaking. And so it's often regarded in that way. But it can be regarded in so many ways. I mean, that being maybe a prominent example, but it's also seen as a great amalgam or mix of sort of styles and considerations, type of cinematic homage, collection, gathering, if you will, with Jean-Luc Godard and company really working their cinematic tendencies to the bone, and providing a film that is chock full of loving references, most notably to sort of Hollywood golden age tradition, with the face of, say, Humphrey Bogart at front and center, given a sense of Hollywood detective thriller, film noir mystery thriller that is in many ways a type of, say, blueprint or schematic, as well as an homage type, as well as a type of um, a spiritual cousin or a spiritual sibling, if you will, to the very heart and soul of and the story of Breathless, involving a type of a petty crime gangster on the run, and the success and failings or the mysteries of love in the context of his romance and relationship with the Gene Seberg character, this Jean-Paul Belmondo and Gene Seberg in sort of iconic roles here, Michel and Patricia. So, in that sense, it has its links to a type of cinematic tradition in history that's also forging its way forward. Because, I mean, I'm trying to express the plot, which is essentially a petty criminal on the run and trying to deal with his maybe complex relationship with his girlfriend, while played by Jean Seberg, while all the while she has her own sensibilities or lack of sensibilities, or a type of optimism or nihilism or cynicism or nihilism, as the case may be, with regard to her viewpoints and her, say, feelings about herself in the context of a sort of modern day culture, and trying to find a sense of forging her identity on the one hand, or perhaps realizing that it's a type of meaningless endeavor on the other hand, or perhaps even something even more cryptic and nuanced and inscrutable. Something unknowable, as the case may be, which is again part of the great dynamic of a film like Breathless. It seems to be creating sort of magic out of seemingly thin air. I mean, there's a tendency of this film to feel light on its feet, and it is. On the one hand, it feels like a frolic. It feels like this patchwork, homemade DIY put together quickie of a sort of a homage to the Hollywood thriller, made on what seems to be a very low budget expense affair. But with that, magic is made, and that magic is in the form of sort of an examination of a type of existential dilemmas, if you will. You know, the ability or inability to understand the other, or the ability or inability to understand oneself, and how that has a real, perhaps potentially damning consequence in terms of how we treat other people. And that is played out so well in the back and forth, push and pull, the on and off relationship between Michel and Patricia. And again, showcased to the fullest in some really show-stopping scenes that take place in a sort of an apartment and bedroom, in various rooms of discussions that are on one plane 1 minute and another plane another minute, and the zigzag and back and forth, and the connections or non-connections, as the case may be, as things go further and further down this type of rabbit hole of a sort of cinematic labyrinthine type of maze that again seems to have been made out of thin air, and it's becoming ever more subtle, ever more complex as we move from minute to minute. It's a fascinating, dare I say it, breathless type of speed that we're going on, while populating this journey with so many, as I mentioned, cinematic homages, but also aspects of a type of pop culture aesthetic that is brought on by a sense of a sort of a cool, chic materialism that is made, I think, very present by the characteristic coolness of the appearances and the on-screen personas of people like Gene Seberg and Jean-Paul Belmondo. I mean, there is a cool mystique about their characters, that all the way down to the hat and the look in the mirror, and the sort of mimicking of the Humphrey Bogart look and phase in the suit on the one hand of Belmondo, and then you have Gene Seberg and the various very famous sort of fashion choices that she has. The haircut, which is also very, very famous indeed. So these have the attributes of the outer exterior look, which also portray or perhaps betray the sense of within, and that forms again part of the mystique and quality, and indeed maybe the betrayal and the destructive aspects of Breathless, as we see this relationship between Patricia and Michel either develop and evolve or devolve and disintegrate before our very eyes in a fascinating way that's also very pop cultural, pop chic, cool aesthetic to the max, with Gene Seberg and Jean-Paul Belmondo front and center for everyone to see and enjoy and be together with throughout this wonderful frolic masterpiece of a film that is Breathless. So there is that going forward, as well as giving rise to a sense of this pop cultural aesthetic in a form of the cinematic stylings and aesthetic as well. There's much to be said about how this film has a jump cut aesthetic that's very fresh and very innovative, and a lot is made of this type of editing technique at the time. And it has a sense of a jarring effect too. I mean, we sometimes cut within the same place, sometimes within the same dialogue's chunk, and that provides a type of disorientation as well as a startle or a jump or a jolt of electricity. So there is an off balancing effect as well as a type of a stimulating effect as well at the same time. So psychologically as well as aesthetically, we have a lot engaging us at the moment, a lot of stimuli engaging us, as well as the way that camera moves and characters look into the camera. Sometimes there is a chilling way that characters look into the camera as though, what's the phrase, breaking the fourth wall, or providing a sense of a real, maybe a shattering the very sort of sense of the illusion between quote unquote what is real, what is fiction, while maintaining the sense of illusion at the same time. And this is one of the great things, the great enigmas of what one might call the French Nouvelle Vague, or the New Wave, or the Jean-Luc Godard aspect of this, at least during this early period, during the early 1960s, with Breathless as being a great example of this, is that there is almost like a fearlessness in terms of shattering what might be perceived to be sort of traditional conventions of cinematic grammar for the sake of something completely different, for the sake of something innovative, perhaps due to practical necessities at the time, perhaps, or the like. But whatever the reasoning may be, the results are the same, which is a type of shattering of cinematic grammar for the sake of something new and something different. And that's what we have here in many regards, even in the way that action is staged. There's a way that action seems to be staged for the sake of calling attention to itself, while providing a type of playful nature about it, while also giving us this idea of, what does it mean to watch cinematic action in action? And really challenging us to sort of probe our very notions of what cinema is, has been to us, and what it can be for us. What does it mean to watch a gunfight played out in Godardian terms in the context of Breathless? I mean, they seem to be quite different from a type of quote-unquote traditional or conventionally staged gunfight that we might see in another action film at the time. But it's the information, the results are the same. So what gives, what makes this difference? Aha, therein lies part of the fun and challenge of watching a film like Breathless. It's a film that seems to be telling a story that is oft-told, but telling it in a way that is totally off the wall, totally throwing things on their heads, and giving us type of white is black, black is white type of attitude, which is not only refreshing and invigorating, but also very challenging and quite provoking to its very core. Again, almost in a way asking, maybe dishing out the challenge to us, saying, hey, make of this what you will, but it is an action thriller at its core, and so you try to find it for yourselves, and hopefully you'll be entertained along the way. That kind of challenge to the audience, and it's and in that way, it is a very enticing film indeed. So that's, I guess, my very crude and maybe unprofessional way of trying to describe my own subjective view of what the French Nouvelle Vague, or the New Wave, is, or what the potential is, at least in the context of a film like Breathless. And I do want to say that Jean-Luc Godard's Breathless is in many ways an emblematic film of Godard. It's also in many ways a wholly unique film in the context of Godard films. I do want to say that watching Breathless does not mean you have seen everything that Godard has to offer, because his filmography is incredibly complex and varied. There's through lines of similarity, that's for sure, but they're also so varied and different. So Uh, in that way, Godard's career in and of itself is ripe for many a conversation, which it has been over the many years of its existence, and I know for many, many years to come, and quite deservingly so. But in that context, we have a film like Breathless, which is again a Godard film on the one hand, but it's a film that also has its own life at this very same time. And it's down to, again, technique, style, a type of capturing of this lightning in a bottle effect that is almost a time capsule effect, that is presenting it in a way which is a prism of electricity and ideas, of things that are turning themselves on their head, self-reflexivity, cinema homage, type of pop art aesthetic in a way that's fearless, no holds barred, breaking down cinematic grammar for the sake of creating something new, and all the while giving us at its very core, heart and center, the powerhouse performances of Gene Seberg and Jean-Paul Belmondo, performances for the ages. Performances for the ages. I mean, whenever you speak about iconic roles in cinema, whenever you think about what cinema is, oftentimes the image of Jean-Paul Belmondo and Gene Seberg will come up. I mean, it's that iconic. It's that iconic for many people. The shot of them, on the streets of Paris, New York Herald Tribune, etc. I mean, those shots scream cinema. I mean, those shots and those stills, in many ways, represent cinema. It's that type of iconic nature that is Breathless. I mean, it is that monumental. It is that landmark status. And regardless of how one might feel about it personally upon, say, a first-time watch or a rewatch, etc., there's no denying its sort of overall humongous influence on the landscape of cinema history. I mean, this is one of the big ones. This is one of the big ones, undeniably so. And then also on a personal note, on an intimate note, it is so much fun. It is such a fun film. It is witty, it's funny, it's sometimes very cruel, it's sometimes very cryptic and mysterious. There are some lines that are just, that boggle the mind. I mean, some lines of dialogue, I just twist my brain into pretzels. It's that type of twisty type of effect on me, almost to the point of maybe Jean-Luc Godard just maybe just being so Jean-Luc in a manner of speaking, just being devilish for the sake of being devilish, perhaps, but or perhaps trying to say something, or perhaps saying nothing and just pulling the wool over everyone's eyes. But if in either case, it's so much fun along the way. It's so great. Jean-Luc Godard's Breathless is one of those magic tricks of cinema. But even that is a phrase that wouldn't do it justice. I mean, it is more than a magic trick. It is more than just a fluke. It's more than what's the phrase, a flash in the pan. This is something big. This is something monumental. This is something that moves things, that really lays down the marker, that really announces to the world not just the voice of Jean-Luc Godard, not just the effervescent presence of Gene Seberg, Jean-Paul Belmondo. It does that, and then some, of course. But this is something that also announces the very presence and history of cinema itself. In many ways, you can feel the ripples of cinema move, the very fabric of history of cinema, just ripen before our very eyes whenever you watch the film Breathless. I mean, it's that monumental, while at the same time being this hip pop art aesthetic, cool film to the max, while being something that is very fun and witty and inventive, and also very perplexing and WTF, and sometimes I don't know what's going on, but that's part of the appeal of this film. That's part of the challenge of this film, and indeed, yes, that's part of the je ne sais quoi, grace and beauty and delight that this film has to offer to people who watch it for the first time and for many, many more times to come. This is the film from Jean-Luc Godard that is Breathless. I should say here before I move on that the Blu-ray menu, what I have here, this is the Blu-ray menu that exists for the Blu-ray, but also the same exists for the 4K disc. It's a great menu. It has this sort of animation way of cutting through and collage effect, and also the color usage, and also the like, and the font Breathless. It's really cool indeed. I love this very much. I should point out, however, that there's just some brief flashes of female nudity from sort of magazines that are shown. So I know that maybe nudity is something that not everyone likes to see in the films that they watch. So just note that there are very very brief flashes of nudity that you'll see in these menus here. It's not, I don't think it's not anything that is explicitly sexual in any sort of way in terms of any kind of sexual act per se, but just know that it's there. So if you're uncomfortable with that, just know about that aspect of the menu there. And I'll try to when I edit the video together, I'll try to be sure that that's not showing when this is put together. But just please note that for purposes of just in case you're interested. The Criterion Collection has re-released this film, Breathless. Again, this is at spine number 408. And in fact, it had a lot of, say, versions over the very long and illustrious history of the Criterion Collection. So now we have Breathless in the latest iteration or latest re-release. Prior to this, there had been a really great Blu-ray release of this, and now we have a re-release which is utilizing the same sort of or similar, practically identical artwork design and sort of digipack design, taking into consideration differences in sizing dimensions for the 4K UHD and Blu-ray combo format, of course. But in terms of the look and aesthetics of this is a re-release that is almost practically identical to the immediately prior release of this film, Breathless, into the physical media catalog of the Criterion Collection, again at spine number 408. But again, this year, on the occasion of 2023, the new 4K UHD plus Blu-ray format. And so on that note, we have a description of the master, and on the latter pages of this great booklet here. And I quote, "Breathless is presented in its original aspect ratio of 1.37 to 1. Undertaken by Studio Canal, this 4K restoration was completed from the 35mm original camera and soundtrack negatives and a 35mm fine-grain master positive at L'Immagine Ritrovata in Bologna, Italy. The HD restoration presented on the Blu-ray was undertaken by the Criterion Collection from a 35mm fine-grain master positive and a 35mm optical track print at Criterion Post and approved by Director of Photography Raoul Coutard. On the 4K Ultra HD disc, the feature is presented in Dolby Vision HDR, high dynamic range. On the Blu-ray, it is presented in high definition SDR, standard dynamic range." Yes, we have this 4K UHD edition, and we have the description of the Studio Canal work with the 4K restoration, and then we have the HD restoration presented on the Blu-ray. So what to make of this? So this is I think it's a fine 4K presentation and release, but I do enjoy the film, and I watched the film on the 4K disc, and I have the 4K disc here in the player. And so there is, when you watch the Blu-ray and you watch the 4K UHD disc, so there seems to be maybe a slight difference to my eye, maybe not so drastic as to make it wholly evident to me in my subjective perspective, of course, but I do sense a sort of slight difference, maybe in terms of the sharpness or the contours, and with regard to the 4K UHD presentation. So that's to say, I'm very content with how it looks on the 4K UHD disc. Excuse me, but. That being said, I always enjoyed the Blu-ray presentation of the Criterion Collection, and I think my feelings have not altered on that point. In other words, I'm not necessarily saying that I will automatically go to the 4K UHD disc as my be-all, end-all default whenever I revisit this film. I may on occasion, but I am also very happy with how it looked on the Blu-ray before and how it still looks on the Blu-ray now. So, and I think that's due to the fact that the film has a type of how should one put it? The film again has a roughness to it, for lack of a better phrase. It has this rushed quality, which is very much its own type of aesthetic, which is very important for the film itself. And I think the Blu-ray and how it looked on the Blu-ray, I think, served that function really well. And while I think that the 4K presentation is very fine, and it seems to serve that very well as in the like, I don't see to my eyes, or I don't sense that drastic a difference enough for me to say that, oh, I must automatically go for the 4K UHD presentation with respect to Breathless. So that may be another way to say is that if you're looking for a Breathless and Criterion release of Breathless for the first time, you don't own this yet, and if you're interested or in the neighborhood of getting it, the 4K UHD plus Blu-ray combo might be the best bet for you. However, if you have the Blu-ray already and you're wondering whether or not you should, say, get the 4K as well, I'm not sure. I think you're fine with the Blu-ray as it is. Not to say that you'd be disappointed with the 4K UHD, mind you, but I think the Blu-ray is not just serviceable, it's actually quite excellent. And so I wouldn't say that it must have in that department. Unless, of course, you are such a big fan of this film, Breathless, that you feel like that will compel you in a very positive way to want to get the 4K UHD as well. That if you feel that way, go for it. That's great. But I think the Blu-ray is very reliable, and while I wouldn't call the 4K UHD any more or any less, it's still a case for me that I think each has I think a fine offering, and in that way, I'm also that's another way to say I'm also very happy with the Blu-ray, but I'm very happy with the 4K UHD release as well. So not at all disappointed, but still, I think both formats still serve the film quite well indeed to my eyes. And so now let us turn our attention to the supplements that can be found included with this wonderful release of Breathless. So this has already been released by Criterion in, say, a Blu-ray form before. And so we're getting the 4K UHD disc and then the Blu-ray disc. So the 4K UHD disc does not have the supplements. It has the film, but it doesn't have the supplements. So if you're going to seek the supplements, your choice is to go to the Blu-ray disc. And so what I've done is I've inserted the Blu-ray disc into the player right now. What I had before was the 4K UHD disc in the player, but now I have the Blu-ray. And as you can see, the difference being now the Blu-ray, including the film offering, also has the supplements submenu here. So what do we have? This is what we've seen in prior Criterion Blu-ray releases of Breathless. So to my understanding, we're not getting anything new per se, but what we did get was excellent, and it was stacked. And as you can see, there's so many things here that we had gotten before and that we're getting again now. So this is great stuff. So the first thing that we have is something called interviews. Now this is all totaling 27 minutes total, and within this we have a number, let's say 5 interviews with 4 persons. So the first 2 interviews are with Jean-Luc Godard, and then the second, the following interview, the third interview is with Jean-Paul Belmondo, and then the fourth interview is with Jean Seberg, and then the fifth interview is with Jean-Pierre Melville. And these are ranging from 1960 to 1964. Recorded for French television, etc. So the first 2 interviews with Godard here, the first one being from Les Frais de Cannes, dated May 1960. The second being A Cinéaste de Notre Temps, Godard and the New Wave, from May 1964. A difference of about approximately 4 years or so between these 2 Godard interviews. The first is really fascinating. There's almost a type of I don't know if contempt is the right word, but there's almost an antagonism of the interviewer towards Godard, and the like, which I find very fascinating in terms of the interview style. Talking about the Cannes Film Festival at the time, Godard's nationality, French, Swiss, type of rebellious nature, his French film critic background that he has, etc. So, and the rules of the Cannes Film Festival and the like. So, a very interesting early, quote unquote, early interview with Godard. So that starts this interview set. And then the second Godard interview, again, is from 64. And here is speaking about sort of the impact of the film Breathless, and it's the overall style and the impetus of the work Breathless, as well as other comments. So Godard being Godard here in these two interviews, and it's very, I think, charming and endearing, as well as quite fascinatingly enigmatic. Let me put it that way. So these are two very key interviews to start this stack. So these Jean-Luc Godard times two, as it's indicated right here. Next up, the third interview is with Jean-Paul Belmondo, and this is Tête d'Affiche. And this is described as being from 61. And here Belmondo is speaking about, again, working with Godard, the film like Breathless, talking about a certain, when we think about Breathless and homages to cinema and the cinematic past, like Hollywood Golden Age here, Belmondo speaks a little bit about favorite actors, favorite performers, and the like. So, and sort of the acting technique, Godard, Belmondo, and the acting technique, etc. So, among other things that Belmondo says here. So, another very, again, Jean-Paul Belmondo and his approach. It's again truly iconic stuff, and also talking about a little bit his background, and he fairly, relatively speaking, not so well known as he later became. With roles like Breathless and beyond. So, very fascinating interview from that respect as well. So, that's the Jean-Paul Belmondo interview. And then the third person listed here, or the fourth interview, is with Jean Seberg. And this is described as being from July 1960, Cine Panorama. And this is also a very frank interview approach towards Jean Seberg. And Jean Seberg here is speaking in French, Français, and she's making reference a little bit to the difficulties that she had in terms of her career and also personally before landing this very famous role in Breathless, and making sort of oblique references to her work with Otto Preminger before working on Breathless. So, and also this idea too of sort of the acting approach and technique, as well as some very frank and sort of personal details and the like, which also emerge in other Jean Seberg interviews along the way. So Jean Seberg, very, very fascinating and so important, again, so iconic to the world of Breathless, to the world of Godard, and in that way to the face of cinema, and the like. And there'll be more about Jean Seberg a little bit later in this collection of supplements. But this interview is fascinating. So that's the Jean Seberg interview. And then last but certainly not least, there's Cine Panorama once again, but this time interviewing Jean-Pierre Melville. This is described as being from July 63. And speaking to Melville, talking about his emergence in the film, sort of his connection slash non-connection to this notion of the French New Wave, his viewpoint of the French New Wave and the figures in the French New Wave, and how he figures into the French New Wave or not, as the case may be, etc., etc. Talking about the intelligence of directors like Jean-Luc Godard being a very, very intelligent director and working with intelligent directors, how sometimes that may or may not equal critical or commercial success. Also, the opposite is true. Maybe commercial success might be met by directors who Jean-Pierre Melville considers, he calls them stupid. So it's a very interesting back and forth in that way. So very fascinating stuff indeed. So Jean-Pierre Melville interview as part of the stack of interviews. So totaling, yes, this set of interviews totals 27 minutes overall. This is must-watch material if you haven't seen it already. So the Criterion Collection is making it available again. So now's your opportunity again to check this out if you haven't already. Fascinating stuff. The fascinating supplements continue though with Coutard and Ricien. And this is in this interview recorded for the Criterion Collection in 2007. Groundbreaking cinematographer Raoul Coutard, who shot 14 films for Jean-Luc Godard, and celebrated cinephile Pierre Lucien, the assistant director of Breathless, recall practical and personal details from the production of Godard's first feature film. And so this is a supplement which is editing these two interviews together into one overall supplement, which is totaling approximately 22 minutes. This is, again, top-notch stuff. Pierre Lucien speaks about some of the anecdotal background, off-the-record drama that occurred on the set of Breathless. Particular maybe some interesting anecdotes involving Jean-Luc Godard and Jean Seberg, etc. And also talking a little bit about the history of how this came to be, the role of Georges de Beauregard, and how originally how Jean-Luc Godard came on board, and how originally Raoul Coutard wasn't Godard's first choice for the cinematographer, but it ended up being that way due to certain, influential choices by de Beauregard and others. And that led to this key relationship between Raoul Coutard and Godard, which, as I say, lasted over a course of many, many films, including Breathless. And that is one of the ingredients for success, one can say, for a film like Breathless, is the cinematography. The Raoul Coutard artistic involvement is, again, immeasurable. It's so invaluable and so critical to the success of this film, Breathless. So we get these, and also ideas about the script and the dialogue molding, etc. Very fascinating, and how Godard would essentially shoot scenes with dialogue. And also Coutard mentions a little bit about the film aspect and how sometimes just the very nature of the film that they were using and the camera that they were using meant that it wouldn't always be in sync. What was shot wouldn't always be in sync with the dialogue that was spoken. So, and also the noise precipitated the need for post-dubbing afterwards, which had a great, again, this quote-unquote purposefully artificial sensibility of the film, which is, again, in equal measure, absolutely brilliant. So this is, again, and also the work ethic and work habits of Jean-Luc Godard are also revealed here, as well as other things about this fascinating work. So Godard and Lucien, this is another top-notch supplement. We've seen it before in previous releases. Again, this was from 2007, yes, but it's still here and it's still brilliant. It's not any less brilliant. It's still 100% fantastic. So please check it out if you can. Next up, Pennebaker on Breathless. This is Jean-Luc Godard once described Breathless as a, quote, documentary about Jean-Paul Belmondo and Jean Seberg. In this interview, recorded for the Criterion Collection in 2007, documentary filmmaker D.A. Pennebaker explores Godard's statement. So this is D.A. Pennebaker one-on-one talking about this idea of the documentary artistic styles that are captured here, or that could be said to be captured in the filmmaking process of Breathless, how it looks. He speaks a little bit too about meeting Godard, how Godard's films, like Breathless, have this sort of frenzied energy about them, like cinema verite, almost being like on set and trying to capture everything in the moment. Much like D.A. Pennebaker's own aesthetic with his films, such as Primary comes to mind and is quoted often here in this short take. It's a very interesting take. It does feel, let's say, it's not 100% wholly figured in onto Godard. It is a supplement that could be said to be maybe equal parts Pennebaker focused as well as Godard focused, but that's fine. That's absolutely fine, because that's also providing the foundation or groundwork for trying to make establishing links between aesthetics that are applied by D.A. Pennebaker and his documentaries, and also how those same techniques or similar techniques could be also said to be applicable in a film like Breathless. So it's an interesting take from D.A. Pennebaker here. So a very very fascinating thing. And I had the great honor of meeting D.A. Pennebaker personally very, very briefly. I mean, just very, very briefly, but it was a very it was one of the great meetings and that I had, and this was at university at the time. So, wow! So it's a very fascinating figure, and fascinating in many ways, including his takes on Godard and Breathless. So, please check this out if you can. This is approximately 10 minutes. 10 minutes, and then continuing on, we have Jean Seberg. So, if we press this, we have. After a much publicized but brief stint in Hollywood, Jean Seberg was selected by Jean-Luc Godard to star in Breathless. It was to become the legendary actress's best remembered role. This video essay, created for the Criterion Collection by Mark Rappaport, the director of the 1990 film From the Journals of Jean Seberg, reveals the true story behind her iconic face. This supplement is approximately 18 minutes. It's a type of video essay. This is, let me say it. This is one of the, how should I put it? When I first got this Breathless Blu-ray, back in the day, many, many years ago, several years ago, I saw this supplement on Jean Seberg right here for the first time, and I remember at the time thinking, this is one of the greatest supplements I've ever seen in my life. It was that kind of thing. It was really something else. And even now when I rewatch it, I'm just totally floored and stunned. At the time I remember, again, when I'd first seen it, I wasn't aware of the specifics of Jean Seberg's, say, life and career. I'd only known her from this and maybe a few other films. I wasn't an expert when it came to the biography of Jean Seberg or the career of Jean Seberg. So watching this really opened my eyes to a lot of what was going on. It was just so fascinating, and there were a lot of details that emerged that were very, very sad and very tragic, and also there's a sense of Jean Seberg, the human being, and the personality and the character of Jean Seberg, and there's a kind of inner strength that comes through, very much so. Some aspects of her career in the context of her work with Otto Preminger, as well as Godard and others, and also her personal and professional lives as well, as they mixed as well along the way in terms of her life. This is stellar stuff. This is stellar stuff. I mean, the supplements are all great, but I just remember thinking, again, when I saw it for this first time, just how great this is. And this was one of the reasons why I thought, oh yes, the Criterion Collection. They do great stuff all the time, and this Jean Seberg video essay to me at the time was an example of that. I'm reminded that again too as I rewatched this on the occasion of this year 2023. This is great stuff. So and again, Jean Seberg and what she brings to the table and why she was cast and what that means, in the context of her previous work with Otto Preminger, Bonjour Tristesse, etc., and how that is seen by many people. François Truffaut being leading the charge, as it were, in terms of considering this a type of spiritual continuity with that previous film, etc., in terms of her characterization here. And other things, the sort of iconic look of her face, showing and revealing things, yet hiding things so much at the same time, not knowing where we are, and that is the perfect. That's almost the look, the register, non-register aspect of Jean Seberg's face. In many ways, is the moment that best encapsulates Breathless. I mean, I love this cover art design by Criterion. Don't get me wrong. This is great cover art design. This is fantastic. But if I were a cover art design artist, now I'm not saying I am, but if I were, maybe I would say, oh, the best idea for the cover art design is to have a close-up of Jean Seberg's face right here. That's, to me, the best representation of what Breathless means to me. And this supplement goes so far in sort of explaining the meaning and significance behind how her face has been represented and what it means, and therefore what she means as a type of image and a figure and a person in the context of her career and also in the context of Breathless. So in that way, it is speaking volumes. So important. What a great supplement this is. So please check it out if you can. it's approximately 18 minutes. That's great stuff. Great stuff. And the great stuff continues. So next is Breathless as Criticism. And this is the video essay. Film historian author Jonathan Rosenbaum explores a number of the cinematic and literary references in Breathless, analyzing what Jean-Luc Godard meant when he said he approached filmmaking as criticism. So yes, I mentioned before that Breathless is chock full of references, both cinematic and literary. And here, Jonathan Rosenbaum goes into some great detail about these in this 11-minute or so supplement. I'm talking about his role as a Godard's role as a film critic and the influence that that had in terms of his own filmmaking aesthetic and techniques, as well as great film references that are mentioned. As well as to aspects of, say, pulp fiction and also film noir, as well as westerns like Sam Fuller and the 40 Guns, etc. So great stuff. So please check this out as well if you can. This is approximately 11 minutes. And then the greatness continues with Chambre 12, Hotel de Suède. And this is in this 80-minute documentary from '93, director and popular French television host Claude Ventura tracks down over 9 days the locations and people involved in the making of Breathless. The program, which includes interviews with actor Jean-Paul Belmondo, filmmaker Claude Chabrol, cinematographer Raoul Coutard, assistant director Pierre Hussein, editor Cécile Desguis, and other members of the cast and crew, is shown here courtesy of Studio Canal. So this is 80 minutes or so, 1 hour, 18 minutes actually by my clock, approximately. And it's shot in this type of video essay, first person loving portrait of the time and place of the hotel room, the hotel chambre. And it's kind of black and white video quality, which I think serves so well because it's meant to pay homage to the Raoul Coutard cinematography of Breathless from late 50s, early 60s. And talking with a number of the participants as mentioned here along the way, again going into some detail about the mood and atmosphere of making the film at the time, Godard and Godard's sensibilities on set and the genesis of film, etc. Again, made in this loving homage way. So it's also a making of documentary, but shot in a very unique perspective. So I like it when the making of documentaries have a different spin on it, and that's certainly the case here with Chambre 12 de Suède. So please check this out if you haven't already. It's like a full-length documentary in and of itself. So it's wonderful, absolutely wonderful. And then there is this film, this short film from Jean-Luc Godard. This is a short film, approximately 12 minutes, and it's 1959, or it's described as being from 1959, and it's called Charlotte et son Jules. And here it says, before Breathless, Jean-Luc Godard shot a handful of short films, including this one from 1959, starring Jean-Paul Belmondo and Anne Colette. It is presented here courtesy of Les Films du Jeudi. So this is a really interesting film. It's set in the context of a relationship between a man and a woman. And Jean-Paul Belmondo is here, and Anne Colette here as well. And also note some of the fashion choices of Belmondo in particular, and how that might have some, say, visual cues with what we might see later in a film like Breathless. It's interesting. Also, sort of the use of dialogue and voiceover, in particular Belmondo, and how it's sort of trying to maybe cast a spell of maybe a type of one-sided manipulation on the one hand, and also an acknowledgement of a disintegration of a relationship on the other, and the like. And that has its hand in a sense of nihilism, maybe is going too far, but maybe a sense of type of complacent cynicism on the part of the people that we see here, which again has its hand, I think, very much in tow or hand in hand with what we might see in Breathless. So in many ways, this is, I think, a great companion work, or this work, Breathless, serves as a great companion work to Charlotte et son Jules, as well as, again, an early indication of the Godard film aesthetic. So please check this out if you can. This is great stuff. And then we have the trailer, which rounds out the supplements here. So lots of stuff, and this is one of the reasons why not only is this one of the most famous films in sort of the history of cinema, but I think it can be considered that at least this Criterion release that we had seen in previous Blu-ray releases, was and is considered one of the sort of iconic releases in the Criterion Collection, in the early 400 spine numbers and beyond. And I haven't even gotten to the booklet yet, and we'll get to that momentarily. But this it was a packed release at its time, and it still is a packed release at its time, and they're all informative and all great. This is what I love to see with the Criterion supplements menu and what it has to offer. This is great stuff. It would have been nice to see new things again for the purposes or on the occasion of this new 4K UHD release, but again, I'm okay with what we had before, which is great, and I'm still happy with that right now, which is still great. So bravo for, again, reminding us of this great release from Criterion. Again, one of the best, in my humble opinion. And if if that were it, then that would still be cause for celebration. But that is not it, because we have this great booklet. Now, let me just take a step back and say that the 4K UHD release here, this new release for 2023, does employ the Digipack format, and it has the outer casing shell here. I like the detail of the inside. I don't know if you can make out the inside. Sorry about the poor lighting, but you can see there's the pattern design there on the inside, as well as the font and the use of this cover art design on the outside. This is great stuff. And then you have the Digipack design, which the inner compartment has this orange and then black and white and light blue motif with this this panel-like approach to various shots from the film, both on the front and the back. And you open it up. Now I have, this is the 2-disc compartment, stacked compartment way. One disc is removed right now, obviously, because it's in the player, that being the Blu-ray disc, and I've just put the 4K UHD disc in the meantime on this lower stack as well. But this is the exciting thing about this. I mean, I love this design and artwork. It's really quite fascinating. Just a note about this too. This also extends into this booklet, except note the black and the black lettering over the red text, and note to the front and the back and the sort of the mirror image of that as you get from front to back. This is fascinating stuff. A Bout de Souffle. Just to point out, art director Sarah Habibi, and then menu and package design Rodrigo Corral, art production coordinator William Breeze, and art assistant Julie Sussman, and menu animations Ian D. Whalen. So bravo for this. I love this font, etc. Although I would say that it might be an interesting proposition to have consideration of, say, the face of Gene Seberg, which is in many ways, it can be said to be the face not just of Breathless, not just of the cinema of Godard, but in many ways perhaps even, yes, the face of cinema. And this is so interesting. I just want to look very briefly at the face of Gene Seberg right here as part of this great packaging, or this great booklet. Breathless, a film by Jean-Luc Godard, using the great color scheme here of reds and yellows. This booklet is a super thick booklet. It's like its own bound paperback, in a manner of speaking. This is the type of booklet that I love. This is so great. And so we have casting credits in this booklet. Also, we have the Dudley Andrew essay, Breathless, Then and Now. Dudley Andrew is a cinema expert and comparative literature expert and professor. I mean, I had the great honor of meeting Dudley Andrew too at university, at Yale University, and so expert in terms of French cinema and Japanese cinema, and that was just the beginning of his expertise. I mean, he's so expert in so many fields, but he's showing his expertise here in French cinema and the cinema of Godard and Breathless, with his essay Then and Now. So please check that out if you can. It's great stuff. And then that's not all, because we have another writing. This is Godard in his own words, and so we have Godard's sort of writings here as represented, or excerpts thereof is represented in another part of the booklet here. Plus we have treatments of Breathless, or Breathless in Progress, as it says. So 2 treatments, or 2 versions, one being the treatment made by François Truffaut, which is an interesting read, very interesting, and then the other described as being the treatment or scenario by Jean-Luc Godard. So this is also very much seeing similarities and differences between their approaches to the story and what points of the story to emphasize, etc. this is just rereading this again when this release came out earlier this year, 2023. What what a beautiful thing this is. Again, learning so much. I'd read it many times before, but reading it again, this just made it all work. Ah, this is so great. This is really great. This is really, really great. So um, please, please, please check this out if you can. And yes, oh gosh, it makes me want Criterion to do this with every single release that it does. So again, this is another reason why this is not only a great film, but this is such a great, iconic Criterion Collection physical media release for because of details like this. So uh, please check out the booklet and the essay, the Dudley Andrew essay, and the other offerings in this. Watch the film first. Please watch the film first, and then after you've seen the film, you can read the Andrew essay, etc., and other writings here. It's definitely worth it. Oh my goodness, it's definitely worth it. Please, please check it out if you can. And with that, my dear friends, that concludes my brief comments on this re-release of the film Breathless. So I love this film. I love this film, and every time I see it, I'm amazed. I'm absolutely amazed. And this Criterion re-release of this film has helped me to again reappreciate the legacy of this film, which is just so awesome, off the charts awesome, for reasons that are so evident on screen and off, of course, considering the deep history of Godard and Belmondo and Seberg. And that history was cast well before the wheels were in motion, well before Breathless was released, and it was in motion when it was released, and it's currently still in motion right now. Breathless is a force to be reckoned with, and it's wholly deserving of that reputation. What a great film this is. Jean-Luc Godard's film, Breathless. All right, my dear friends, so that's it for now. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well. And please keep on watching a lot of great, great, great movies, including Breathless, including other films by Godard, films of Belmondo and Jean Seberg and others, and beyond. So until the next video, my dear, dear friends, stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.